What I'd like to do now is have you open your sofa and rug assignment. We'll open that and I want to show you how to make a block. So go ahead and open yours and I'll do the same thing on my end. And then what I'd like to do is zoom out a bit. My sofa and rug assignment not complete because I don't have the rug there yet, and that's okay. I'm simply going to take advantage of the fact that I have the 3-seat sofa completed here, and I want to make a block out of it. When I look at this, my sofa, my 3-seat sofa is made up of these individual lines. When I used it to make my 2-seat sofa, I decided that I was going to make a copy of it. And when I made a copy, for example, I'll come over here to copy, I had to window everything like this. And I selected, as you can see down there, 9 objects. But I'd like to take these 9 objects and convert them into one single block that represents my 3-seat sofa. Let me tap the escape key and show you how to do this. And moving forward, I am going to be using the keyboard a lot more. You'll notice if you practice using the keyboard, you'll see that it's a little bit more effective and efficient when it comes time to complete the assignments. I will come over here every now and then also and show you where to find this information on screen. If I go to the Insert tab, you see that I have an option to insert blocks. But I don't have any blocks yet in this assignment. So what I'd like to do is go over here to create a block. What I'd like to do is construct what is called a block definition. So I have to define a block. What I'm going to do is create a block. And if I go to that dropdown, I have create block as an option, and I also have write block. Create block would very simply be that drawing within your drawing file. If you write a block, you are basically constructing a W block. That means it would have a DWG extension, and that means it exists outside of this drawing file. But we'll start with create block. So I'm going to go there and click on it, and it opens up this screen. It's a block definition. Keyboard shortcut, let me close this for a moment. Keyboard shortcut simply is B and enter. I need to define my block. Now, this window here, this dialog box, I'm going to take it really slow, and I'm going to start with the name. If I go to the dropdown, if I had other blocks in here, it would show me the names, but I don't. So I'm simply going to type in the name here, and I'd like to give this block a definition, and it's going to be a block of my 3-seat sofa. So I'm going to call it sofa, and then I'm going to put a dash in there like this, and I'm going to call it 3-seat, just like that. Feel free to call it anything that you want, but keep it descriptive. And the reason I called it sofa first and then 3-seat after is because blocks are stored in this alphanumeric order. And if I have the 2-seat sofa, let's say I want to make a block out of that, I would call it sofa 2-seat. I'm going to take this step by step, starting with the base point, then objects, then behavior. So beginning with base point, it wants me to specify a base point. Right now, by default, that base point is X and Y equal to 0. But I could, if I wanted to, specify it on screen. And if I click specify on screen here, and as soon as I select OK, it's going to ask me for a point to select, an endpoint, a midpoint, whatever I'd like to do. But for this example, since I already know that I'm going to pick it from this lower left-hand corner, those coordinates are already set. So I am not going to specify on screen. I'm going to leave this alone, and I'm going to let it be 0, 0, 0. Now, if I wanted to pick that point right away, I can go ahead and click here and say pick point. And if I do that, if I just come right down here, if I pick this point, it's going to default to X, Y, Z equals 0. Let me prove this to you. If I pick point again, I pick a different point, for example, let's say the midpoint here. Notice how those coordinates changed. and it's giving me the X and Y coordinate of that specific midpoint. So I'll go back to pick point, and I will select this endpoint right here, and it defaults to the 0, 0. Next, objects. What do I want to have? Which objects do I want to select as part of my definition? I will immediately go here to where it says select objects. If I hover, it will close the block definition dialog box temporarily, allowing me to select the objects. So I'm going to click select objects. The window goes away temporarily. And what I'd like to do is just window all of the objects here that represent the 3-seat sofa. I do not want to select any more objects, so I enter. And as soon as I enter, the window comes back. And you'll notice in the window, it's showing me a preview of what that block looks like. I've selected my objects, tells me that 9 objects were selected. And now I have 3 options in these radio buttons. I can either retain the objects as individual lines as soon as I make the block. I can convert it to a block immediately, or I can delete the objects once I make a block. For the most part, I will always select convert to block. There may be rare instances where I want to retain the objects or maybe even delete them, but for the most part, convert to block it is. Over here to behavior, I do not want to make it annotative. We'll talk about that later. But I do want to make sure that if I needed to, I could scale this uniformly. And I also want to allow exploding. So I want to make sure those 2 are selected. In the settings category, my block unit is inches. My base unit is inches. It defaults to inches. So I want this to continue to default to those inches. If I wanted to, I could enter a hyperlink, and maybe I have found a sofa online and I drew it here and I can link it, but I've not seen anybody do that. We usually avoid hyperlinks. And then in the description, I guess I could just simply call it my 3-seat sofa like that. And then I have one more box down here where it says open in block editor. I'll talk to you about block editor later. So this is it for my block definition. I can go ahead and click OK. Done. How do I know that I was successful in making the block? Real easy. Hover over any one of the lines like this. Look at that. And as soon as I hover and I pause, it tells me it is a block reference. That means it was successfully done. And notice how all of the lines that I had selected, all 9 of them, are now being highlighted. So this is a block. If I click on it and I come over here to my properties, and by the way, if your properties window is closed, you can certainly right-click over the object and click on properties. That'll open the window for you. I have mine selected, come over here to properties, and it tells me it's a block reference. That's all I need to know. Down here, the name tells me it's a sofa 3-seater. So great, successfully done. So what's the advantage of having this as a block? Well, let me tap the escape key and I'll show you. And let's say it was any other object, not necessarily a sofa, it could be anything else. I can go back to the home tab here. I can go to copy, for example, and I can select any one of the lines that represent the block and we'll pick the entire block. I click on it, I enter, and now I can go ahead and make a copy anywhere else. And I just tap the escape key to make that go away. I can come over here to rotate. And to rotate, just pick any one of the lines that represents the block, enter, pick a base point, and rotate. And I'm all set. So that's done. The other thing I can do here is I can go to my window for my blocks. I'll come up here to insert. And I will now click on the drop down where it says insert block. And you could see that it saved that block definition in my drawing. And all I have to do is click it one time and it will bring it in. And notice how it's bringing it in based on that base point that I selected, which was at the lower left-hand corner. So I can bring the block in and just place it over here if I want. And then what's really nice is I can grip it. And notice with one grip, I'm sorry, I grip it one time or I click on it and it has one grip point. Well, now I can select it from that grip point like this. And I can go ahead and stretch it. Or if I right click, I can move it, I can rotate it, possibly even scale it, but we don't do that too much. I can even mirror it. So let me go to rotate here. And now I'm rotating it based on that one base point, and that can work out. I'll tap the escape key. I just wanted to show that to you. And what's really nice is if I accidentally take this and delete it, and I accidentally delete this block as well, it's okay because I still have it in my block definition. So I go back to Insert, Sofa 3-Seater. I select it, and I'll go ahead and I'll actually specify the insertion point by typing 0,0, enter, and it puts it right back where I wanted it. Remember the definition. A block is a drawing inside of a drawing file. So I now have this drawing here, and the name of it is Sofa 3-Seat. It's a drawing, and it resides within my drawing file, sofaandrug.dwg. Let's say that I wanted to make a W block out of this block. How do I do that? Let me tap the escape key. I will go over here to create block dropdown, and I would like to write a block. And what this will do is it will provide it with a DWG extension, and it's going to place it wherever I choose on my drive. So I'm going to click on write block, and this window opens. Now, this window looks similar to the last one. I can go ahead and select objects, select a base point, pick my objects. But I already have, as my source, I have a block in here. So I'm going to take that block. I'm going to the drop down here, and I'm going to select my 3-seat sofa. When I do that, it has that information, and now it wants the file name and path. So it's going into my documents folder. It will be saved out as Sofa 3-Seat. Now, let me show you my folder. This is my folder right here. And you can see files here have the DWG extension. And now what's going to happen is as soon as I click the OK button, it's going to take that sofa, that block, and it's going to write it out to my hard drive, and it will now have a DWG extension. So I'm going to click OK. Done. I go back to my folder, and there it is. It now has a DWG extension. So I was able to take it out of my sofa and rug DWG, and I made its own sofa 3-seat.dwg out of it. I'll minimize that. All right, what I'd like to do is practice this again. And I'm going to close my sofa and rug, and I'm going to open up my entourage drawing. I'll close this out, save changes, yes. And I'm going to open my entourage file. And I'm going to click open. Homework is going to be to make blocks out of all of the individual drawings that you have. So go into them, and for example, the refrigerator, the sink, the stove, make blocks out of them so that they behave as individual objects. I'm going to make blocks out of my trees, and I have trees in plan view, and I also have trees in elevation, and I have a lot of them. So you can decide how you want to name them. I've seen it where some people just call it tree 1, 2, 3, 4. Some people refer to them as tree plan. Some refer to them as tree elevation. I will leave it in your capable hands to give it a name that you like. So I'm going to begin with this one up here, and this is going to be in plan view. So I'm going to zoom into it. And I'll tell you what, I'll make a block out of this one, and then I will show you how to make a W block out of the other one. So beginning with this one first, keyboard shortcut B and enter. What I'd like to do now is give my block a name. So I'm going to refer to this one as tree 01 plan, only because it's in plan view. For the base point, I'm going to pick the base point. I'm going to click here, and that's going to be my insertion base point, as you saw in the previous block that I made. So I click on pick insertion base point, takes me out here, and I'd like to pick the endpoint here, and that endpoint happens to be at the center. So I'll click on it. It comes back to me and it gives me these very strange coordinates, and that's fine. As long as it has selected that endpoint, which is at the center of my tree, I'm fine with it. I'd like to convert it to a block, so I leave that alone. The warning here tells me that I have not selected objects, so I better go ahead and select objects. So I'm going to click on the icon to select them. And now what I'll do, I know I did an implied window the last time. I'm going to do an implied crossing like this. And this makes sure that I select everything because it's a crossing window. Any object that crosses through it or is completely inside will be selected. So I click on it. And it has selected the 8 objects. Then I ask myself, why does it still want me to select objects? I don't want to select any more. So I'll enter. And now that I've entered, it tells me that I've selected 8 objects. It starts to show me the preview here. I have picked my name. I have picked the base point. I have selected my objects and my behavior. Again, I'm going to leave annotative alone for now. Eventually, I will use that. I just want to make sure that I can scale this uniformly and also allow it to explode. Make sure that my settings, I don't touch those. They are left at inches. And this time, no description. And I will not open in Block Editor just yet. So I can go ahead now and click OK. And that has now become a block. How do I know? If I hover over it, there it is. If I click on it, it shows me that one point that I selected. That's the insertion point. If I go over here to my property, since I have it selected, it tells me that it is a block reference, and this is the name I gave it. Now I'll tap the escape key, and I'll move down to the next one. So this one, just as an example, I want to convert it into a W block, just straight W block. I'm going to bypass making a block out of it. So I can type W, and that is the keyboard shortcut for W block. They refer to it as a right block. So I'll enter. And just for a little bit of history, that W didn't always stand for right. That W meant a world block. And this is in the early days of AutoCAD. Instead of referring to that hard drive on the computer directly as a hard drive, they just referred to it as making a world block, meaning that it was accessible in the world of your hard drive. Little trivia for you. On this one, I could go back to block here, and you see that I do have that tree 01. I could select it, but I told you I'm going to try something different here. So I'm going to select my source is going to be objects. Let's see, click on it. There we go. Now I will go ahead and pick my insertion point. So I click on that, and I'm going to pick the center here. So any one of the endpoints will do. I get some very strange X and Y coordinates, and that's fine. For my objects, yes, I do want to retain them. I can also convert them to a block. Interesting. So I guess maybe I do convert it to a block in this case here. And I'm going to select my objects. And I select all of these objects. Do I want to select any more? No. So I enter. 22 objects found. Now it's asking me for that file name and path. And you notice here it says new block. It's just defaulting to a new block name. I want to make sure that it's going to the correct folder, which it is. But if you'd like to, it says display a standard file selection dialog box. I'll click here. And it will show me where it's going to be placed. And there's the file name. So here's what I can do. I can call this one, I'll just refer to it as a sample tree. And I'll click save. And notice how it changes the name right here. Insert units, inches, that's fine. And I'll go ahead and click OK. And just like that, it made a W block. And if I go back to my folder here, you'll see there's the sample tree. And what happened here, as I hover over it, it tells me it made a block out of it. And if I select the block and I come over here to the properties, there's the name, sample tree. It's possible to make the W block and it will make the block automatically for you if you choose the option, or you can make the blocks and then output them as W blocks later. Tap the escape key, make that go away. All you have to do is simply make blocks. That's it. You don't need to make W blocks. Here's what's really neat. What I like about being able to scale trees in particular. So this is a block here. I will go ahead and copy that. So I'm going to type CO and enter for copy. Now I'm going to make a copy of it over here. And then I'm going to tap the escape key. Now they look the same. And I'd like for them to look just slightly different. So I can select this copy of the block. I can go in here to that insertion point. I can click on it. And when I do that, I can go ahead and right click and I can scale it. And I can scale it up just a little bit more, just a little bit bigger than the other one, like this. And then I'll go back, click on that insertion point, right click it and select rotate. And I'll rotate it ever so slightly. No precise angle, just whatever looks good here. And I'll click. And I'll tap the escape key. And you notice it's the same block, but this one here, if I select it and I go into my properties, I have altered my scale and it shows that to me here. And I've also rotated it. The numbers don't matter to me. What matters to me is that I was able to take a block and manipulate it to make it look slightly different. And in this case, it works very well for trees because they're not all the same size. And then if I want to, I'll just select it again, go to this insertion point and bring it closer and let it overlap like this, and then tap the escape key. You can imagine I can now take these and drop them into a site plan, and they look like trees that are next to each other and overlap a bit. I want to just come over here and click on insert, and you'll see I have 2 blocks in my list, and they're in this drawing file. So it's a block, and it resides within my Entourage drawing file, a drawing within a drawing file. And then if I want to, I can come over here and open my sample tree. And when I click open, it takes me right to that sample tree. This is now its individual parts and pieces. But if I wanted to, I can actually make a block out of it inside of this drawing file. But I'm not going there right now. I'm going to leave that alone. So let me close this out and also close this out. And I do want to save my changes. I want to show you what's great about making blocks in Wblocks. If I start a new drawing file here, and I'll go with my drawing template, and I format my units, and I'll set them to architectural. There we go. And then I zoom out. What I can now start to do is bring some of those blocks and even the Wblocks into this file. So let's give this a shot. Let's start first with insert, and I can go to blocks from library. And when I go there, this is going to open up a window here. And I'd like to go into a library like this. I'm going to click on that. What library do I want? Well, I'd like to go into this file right here. I'll refer to that as a library. This is what AutoCAD does. So it says select a folder or file for the block library. All right, I'm selecting this file. I click open. And you do have to pause for just a moment while AutoCAD takes all of that information and brings it into this window, this palette. There we go. What you see here is a list. And this one here is my DWG file. So it's actually taking that DWG and saying that that whole W block is available. But then it also found that 3-seat sofa within the W block. So it's identifying blocks and W blocks for me. So now all I have to do is select the sofa. I click it one time. And now I bring it over and I can place that sofa anywhere I want here. I'll specify the insertion point, just generically place it right there. Done. I'll do it again. This time I'll go to my library and I'm going to open up the Entourage drawing file and I'll open it. Give it a moment so it processes the information. There we go. So it's showing me the entire W block, my Entourage DWG, and then it found 2 blocks inside of that drawing file. So I'll pick my sample tree, comes in, and it's at the same scale. And the tree, obviously, when we drew it, much, much bigger. So I'll click right here. I have it. I'm going to zoom out. Now I'll take this tree, bring it in right there. And in fact, the other thing I could do, and I'm really going to zoom out, is I can take that entire drawing file, this Entourage drawing, click it one time, and bring it in here. And remember what I told you earlier, when I bring in a drawing file into another drawing file, it's no longer a drawing file, it's simply a drawing. So it's now a block and I can click on it. And now if I hover over it, look at this, it's acting as one single object. It's a block reference. But let's say that I wanted to use the elevation of this tree, just the elevation. How do I do this? I would have to explode the block. And when I explode a block, it breaks it down to its individual parts and pieces. I will simply type X to explode and enter. When I type X, I now select the object and then I enter. And now my block that I brought in is now broken down to its individual parts and pieces. And because I never made a block out of these objects, they come in as they were in the original file. But I did make a block out of this one. So that comes in as a block. This also comes in as a block. But I had already brought that in over here. And now if I want to, I can go ahead and make a block out of this tree in elevation and use it here. Or, as I said to all of you before, make sure you go back into the files, make individual blocks out of all of them. And you will have them to use in the future.